Hello everyone, in this video we'll be diving into while loops in Python. Before understanding what while loops are in computer science, you need to know what loops are. Loops are a fundamental concept in programming that allow us to execute a block of code repeatedly. In Python, we have different types of loops, and one of the most commonly used ones is the while loop. Loops are also a form of control flow. So now let's talk about while loops. The while loop allows us to repeat a block of code as long as a certain condition is true. While loops are particularly useful when we want to iterate over a set of instructions until a specific condition is met. They provide flexibility and control over the flow of our program. Before we explore examples, let's understand the basic syntax of a while loop. It consists of a condition and an indented block of code. The condition is evaluated before each iteration, or movement through the loop, and if it's true, the code block is executed. After each iteration, the condition is evaluated again, and the loop continues until the condition becomes false. Let's start with a simple example to illustrate the usage of a while loop. Suppose we want to count from 1 to 5 and print each number. We can achieve this using a while loop as follows. We can set count equal to 1, and we can say while count is less than or equal to 5. Then we can print count, so we'll print the number, and then we will add 1 to the count. And if you remember, plus equals is the same as doing count equals count plus 1. It's just a shorter way of doing that. Remember, plus equals just adds 1 to an integer. So in this, we set count to 1, and then while count is less than or equal to 5, we will print count, and then we'll increment it by 1 until, and obviously until it's greater than 5. So let's run this. And as you can see, we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here's another example of a while loop. We can set count equal to 0, and we'll say is loop done is equal to false. And then we can say while is loop done is equal to false. Then we will increment count by 1, and then we will print count. And then down here, we will do if the count is greater than or equal to 5, we will set is loop done to true. So this might look a little bit complicated, but just bear with me. So we set count to 0, we set this boolean to false. So it is the loop done. It's not done yet. It'll be done down here. But so while it's not done though, while it's false, we'll add 1 to count each time, then we'll print it. And then in this while loop, it checks to see if count is greater than or equal to 5. And then if it is, it sets this to true. So this is a little bit more complicated form of the previous example, but the previous example used the count variable in the actual while loop. And you don't have to do that. So if we save this and ran it, we would get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You may notice that in these while loops, we always have something that will break the loop, like the count variable, which I've used for these simple demonstrations. If you don't have something that'll eventually stop the loop, it'll go on forever until we stop the program. So if we remove this if statement over here, it would just keep going on until someone stopped the program. So let's see this in action. The number keeps going up over and over and over until we stop it with Control C. While loops can also be terminated before the condition becomes false, using the break statement. To use the break statement, let's create an infinite loop. There are many ways to do this, but the most common one is to type while true. The while true will go on forever because if you remember, typing a boolean in a condition, so this is just a variable, so we can name this whatever we want, var. So typing a boolean in a condition is the same as typing the boolean equals true. It's just a simpler way to type it. This also applies for while loops. And so in the while true loop, we're essentially saying while true equals true. And true will always equal true, so it'll go on forever. You could also do this by putting two equal strings like hi and hi, because this will go on forever as well, because hi will always equal hi. But it's a lot more conventional to say while true, because everyone knows that while true is an infinite loop. So in this infinite loop, we will need a way to stop it. Let's create a count variable above the while loop. Now after every iteration of this infinite loop, we can make the count get higher and then print it. Now we can check to see if the count is greater than or equal to 5. And if it is greater than or equal to 5, we can just break. So just type break. And so you might notice that you could just say if count is equal to 5, but in loops it's just more conventional to do this, greater than or equal to. And so what this is doing is we're iterating through this loop every time it increments count by 1 and then prints it. And then if the count is 5 or greater, then we will break out of this loop and we'll stop it. If we didn't have this break, it would just go on forever. It would keep adding and adding and adding and adding. So this infinite loop isn't an infinite loop once we have this break statement here. So to sum it all up, we just used a while loop with the condition true, creating an infinite loop, and inside it, we make the count get higher by 1, and then if it is, then we stop. Now let's talk about continue statements. Continue statements let us skip the rest of the loop and start back from the beginning. I'm going to show you with our previous example. As you can see, when we run this, it prints 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What if we wanted to still count all the numbers correctly, but not show the number 3 to the user by printing it? So we want to count everything correctly, but just not print number 3. Well, we could use a continue statement. Let's create an if statement that checks to see if the count is equal to 3, and then it continues. Above print, we will say if count is equal to 3, then we'll type continue. And this is pretty simple because it adds 1 to count every time, and then if it's 3, it continues. And so what continue does, like I said, is it just skips all this and just goes right back to the beginning of the loop. So continue, after continue, it goes back to the beginning, checks if the condition is true, and then it does everything else. And then in here, if it's not 3, it won't continue. It'll just print it and then go through here. So this will print 1, 2, 4, 5, like this, because it just skipped everything else once it was 3. Congratulations, you've learned about while loops in Python and how they can be used to repeat a block of code until a condition is met. While loops provide flexibility and control over the flow of your program. Keep practicing and experimenting with while loops to become more comfortable with this powerful looping technique. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.